When I was 3 years old, my father started sexually abusing me. He abused me all throughout my childhood, not just sexually, physically, emotionally, psychologically, bullying, threatening to kill me, just every type of abuse that you could pretty much imagine. One side of me excessively loved him. I adored him. I worshipped him. And on the other side, I was terrified of him. My first memory of him telling me, "I'm going to kill you and bury you there if you tell anybody what I've done."
How would you describe the traits and behaviors of an abuser?
There is a line where if that child is just so defensive of that parent, hyper attached to them, that can be a sign. He had these like crazy eyes. When he would shift personalities or when he would become abusive, it's like his eyes went black.
Did you notice any physical things in you that someone on the outside would be able to see?
I had headaches every day. I had tummy issues as a kid. I couldn't see properly, which now I know is dissociation. I had this rash that I used to lick my lip and dry it, lick my lip and dry it. Like I was obviously so uncomfortable with like my mouth and with things that I'd done with my mouth. Huge emotional outbursts, anger issues, and I would rage.
How did you start connecting this interest to like your own personal life?
I was trying to like understand spirituality on like a scientific, logical level. And then I moved into like emotions and sematics and breath work and how to tap into our body. And then I started learning like memory processing. I did this meditation one day and these flashbacks came out. Why are these memories in the box? Just cracked everything open. I called my mum and was like, "I think Dad sexually abused me." I did know how to heal it, and I did know that it was possible because I'd done it with other memories. I was like, same thing, let's apply it, let's go. Once you heal it and you get past it, the next level version of yourself that you become is even better than what you've just experienced. That's why I created a Ruka, because you process the memory, you shift the energy, you remove the subconscious beliefs, and like you somatically experience and move the emotions, it completes it.
Where does it all begin for you?
Oh, wow. It's such a big story. If I was to really pick a moment where it all began and where I sort of ended up where I am now, I became obsessed with trauma and with how to heal trauma and how trauma healing works in my 20s. And it felt just like a hobby to me. And I didn't realize until many years later that I was so obsessed with it because I was trying to figure out how to fix myself, how to heal my own trauma. And so I guess it really, really started when I was 3 years old. My father was sexually abusive or started sexually abusing me. It could have happened earlier than that, but I don't have any conscious memories. And he abused me all throughout my childhood, not just sexually. It was quite frequently sexual abuse, but also physically, also emotionally, also psychologically, also very critical, bullying, threatening to kill me. Just every type of abuse that you could pretty much imagine was that my reality with my father. And he was also raised by a really, we'll call him evil man, because it's the only word that comes to mind for him. His father was also quite an evil man, and he actually raped me and took my virginity when I was 7 years old. So I spent alongside all of that trauma that was happening at home and within my family and things that are just so much for a child to comprehend. I also would go to my mum's house. They divorced when I was around 7, and my mum was quite dissociated, had her own stuff going on, had her own stuff happen with him. And so I felt quite alone there. And I would go to school and I would be bullied in school every single day. And I just went from trauma to trauma to trauma and literally spent my entire childhood and my teens and most of my 20s in just survival, just in waiting for the next hit, because there was always something else that happened, whether it was being cheated on or whether it was friendships breaking down, or in my 20s, I was raped by my father unexpectedly because the abuse had stopped for quite a few years. And then there was just like, I got bitten by a tick. I got diagnosed with Lyme disease. I had a molar pregnancy, which is like this super rare condition. And it was just like this onslaught of something big happening every like 6 months, and just stacking of this trauma. And yeah, when I hit my 20s, I started trying to heal, and I was trying to, at that point, I had repressed a lot of trauma and I didn't know why I was suffering so deeply the way that I was. And that's why I was trying to uncover, how it all works and how you heal. And yeah, and that kind of set me on this path to really, I wanted to like crack the code. I wanted to understand, like, it wasn't good enough for me that you just had to deal with what happened. Like I read all these forums and these people saying like, you just can't heal from that much trauma. You just can't heal from that level of trauma. It's too much. It's always going to stay with the person. And I was like, no, fuck that. That's not me. I don't want that. I'm not putting up with that. I'm going to find a way. And that just became my literal obsession for the last 15 years. And I actually kind of fell into it as a career by accident because I just was so passionate about it that people started wanting to work with me and see me and like, how did you do it? And it just kind of happened by accident. So definitely was where I was meant to be and what I'm meant to be doing. Yeah. But that's kind of like a really broad overview of like what led me here.
I'm guessing you lived with your father when this was all happening. And so it being able to happen on such a regular basis.
No. So it started around 3 and it happened when my mum was out of the house and things like that until I was 7. And then they divorced when I was 7. And my mum did have predominantly custody. So I would only see my dad on Wednesday nights and every second weekend, but every opportunity that he had, he would take. So it was being abused sort of once a week. I can only gather by the volume of memory. The thing that people don't kind of realize is that like when it's happened from such a really young age, because my father was so horrible to me when he wasn't abusing me, I very quickly linked that time with him and that sexual abuse as what love is. And so it was uncomfortable and it felt icky and it made me feel, yuck or disgusting. But it was also like somewhat normal until later on in my life when I realized it wasn't normal. And then it was a different scenario each time it happened because you knew how wrong it was.
Do you feel like that sort of somehow being this ritualistic occurrence that just kept happening and it sort of being normalized, like a part of your routine? Do you think that may have been a reason for why you didn't feel like you could reach out to people and tell people about what's going on? Or for example, during the custody battle, in the divorce process, like for that kind of information to come out, which could be momentous in kind of cutting that relationship?
Well, the thing is, my mum was really afraid of my dad, so she wasn't really pushing back on him in any way. It was, the 90s, early 2000s. So custody was basically like everyone I knew saw their dad once a week and every second weekend. Like that was just like mums get this, dads get this. And there wasn't really much more into that. But the reason that I didn't tell was this really plays into the two personalities that I developed, which was that one side of me excessively loved him, like almost to the point of a romantic connection. Like I loved him, and now as I can see looking back, in the way that you're not supposed to love your dad, because obviously I was groomed that way, but I loved him excessively. Like I adored him. I worshipped him. He was everything. And so I was so afraid of losing his love. Like when he would scream at me and yell at me, I would panic and I would hope that, and I even once said to him, like, when are we going to have our special time? Because I just so needed him to love me. And that was the only way that I knew how to get it. And so I didn't want to break ties with him. I didn't want to not see him again when I was that age, when I was 7. It was only in my teen years that I started to be like, I hate you. But around that younger age, I just like, and it's got to be biology. Like I needed him for survival. I felt like I needed him. And on the other side, I was terrified of him because from 5 years old is my first memory of him telling me, this is where I'm going to bury you, in the backyard, like right over there. This is where I'm going to bury you. I'm going to kill you and bury you there if you tell anybody what I've done. And he would repeat that to me often. He came into my bedroom one night and held a pillow over my face when I was only 5, like suffocating me and then letting me breathe, suffocating me, letting me breathe, and just reminding me, this is where I'll bury you. So there was like, ain't no way I'm going to tell anybody, because on one hand I'll die or I'll lose my dad and I'll lose that love. And at that point, I thought that as well. This is where the psychological comes into it. I thought he was my only source of love because he told me all the time, your mum doesn't care about you. Your mum doesn't love you. She's weak. She's pathetic. She can't do anything. She just doesn't even care about you. And I believed that because he was telling it to me all the time and saying, I love you because look, I do this and I do this. And so it was just like, I can't lose him because then that's the only person that loves me. And then I'm going to lose him and I'm going to have no one. So there was this like fight in me all the time of like safety, losing love. And it made it impossible as a child to tell.
Can you walk me through, in your professional expertise, how would you describe the traits and behaviors of an abuser for anyone who's listening and maybe unaware, like, am I in something abusive?
Yeah, I noticed this when I speak to mums and they're like not sure if there's something's happening to their child and wanting to know. From a behavioral perspective, he was very controlling. He was always putting on a show outside of the house. He was always like really concerned with what other people thought of him and his appearance, very vain. But he was also very, very hot and cold, up and down. And my relationship with him was, I was very, I think kids are attached to their parents and they love their parents, but then there is a line where if that child is just so defensive of that parent, scared, like so afraid of losing that parent, like hyper attached to them, that can be a sign as well. Like excessive time spent with that child over the other children, or different treatment, like treating children in different ways. So I was like the one that was criticized and put down and like sort of isolated and put to the side, whereas my sister was kind of worshipped and she was treated in a different way to my brother. And so treating different children in different ways actually also pits them against each other, because then they have different relationships with that parent and then they're less likely to like bond themselves. So that was another sign. But then also, like, he was a serial cheater. He was addicted to porn. He had porn everywhere. Like, it was back in the 90s. So it was like magazines and videotapes, but like in his truck, in the bathroom, like he left them laying around. Like, he didn't care who saw that content. So like in his mind, it was obviously somewhat normalized because he was watching it so much. And that's actually a really common sign, like men that are quite addicted to porn. And just this, I know that this is like not something that you can pinpoint, like you might not pinpoint easily, but so many people said to me, and I noticed his eyes, like he had these like crazy eyes. Like when he would shift personalities or when he would become abusive, it's like his eyes went black. And I guess it's like soulless eyes. And I've noticed other people that have come out as abusers or that have like been found as abusers, and I always know straight away because like they have this look, they have these eyes. And it's
That's so interesting. It's like it reminds me of some of those like murder documentaries. And, when someone says like, I saw black, I don't know what happened after that. I just blacked out. It's almost like that dissociation in a sense. Yeah.
It is, yeah. And I'm sure that they are like literally switching into a different personality because they speak different and they act different. And that's another thing as well, like shifting into having these like really distinct different versions of themselves. Like if you're in a marriage with somebody and you know that they shift personalities within that marriage, they can be really nice and loving and warm, and the next minute cold, switched off, they have those dark eyes, they treat you really differently, they're kind of doing this up and down. It gives you a pretty good indication that they are shifting between personalities essentially, which, DID, dissociative identity disorder, they're dissociating and going into this different version of themselves. If they're doing that, that's not to say they're a predator, but it is a pretty there is a pretty strong connection there between people who do that.
Now, I also want to ask, looking back on your experience, what were the body changes or the ways that you were behaving and acting? Did you notice any other kind of physical things in you that maybe someone on the outside would be able to see you and say, something is not right here?
Yeah. I mean, I had headaches every day. I had tummy issues as a kid. I had lots of eye tests and there was nothing wrong with my eyes, but I couldn't see properly, which now I know is dissociation. But like those headaches, tummy issues, and eye issues all combined together give you a pretty clear indication of trauma. What's actually so fascinating is that when I was 5, the opening of my vagina, or of my vulva, sorry, closed over. It was called labial fusion, and so a layer of skin grew over the opening so that nothing could go in. And I just find that that is like, that might sound a bit woo-woo to some people, but I feel like that was my body protecting itself, like trying to grow this layer of protection. And this is probably would be a good question for my mum. When I came forward and she spoke to some of her girlfriends who she's had for many years, one of them actually said to her, I actually had a feeling about him, and I noticed that when we would go out together and go out for coffee or whatever and come back, she always had a red vagina. She always had issues, or she had like, nappy, you would think it was nappy rash, but it was red and inflamed, and it shouldn't have been like that. And I actually had this feeling and I should have said something, which, people don't. But there was definitely things that my mum, looking back, was thinking, yeah, okay, like Jess had, compared to her siblings, I had like huge emotional outbursts. I couldn't control my emotions. I had anger issues later on in life where I would switch and I would rage, and I just had all these feelings that I didn't know what to do with. And I had this rash that I used to like lick my lip and dry it, lick my lip and dry it. Like I was obviously so uncomfortable with like my mouth and with things that I'd done with my mouth. And so there was this obsession or this tick where I would lick and dry my lip all the time. So I ended up with this huge rash around my lips, which now I've discovered is like a really common sign, and people call it the sexual abuse rash, like lip rash. And so there are like these things that I was doing that I realize now, like I was uncomfortable in my body in those certain areas. And so my body responded, or I responded with these ticks, or with like my skin literally growing over the opening of my vagina, which is wild. And I have had people come to me, they've heard me share that, and they're like, my daughter had that happen and she hasn't been abused and you shouldn't say that, which, even that really defensive, protective part can sometimes be something to look at too, because if we don't think it's relevant, we could probably just let it go. But if we're really fired up by that, there's probably a reason.
Did you at that point feel like you had any place where you could feel safe, like really safe? Like, talk to me about that first time you shared it with someone.
Yeah, so the only time that I felt safe, I definitely wasn't going to be sharing it with my mum or anyone when I was younger. I did feel safe. My mum's parents lived in Queensland, so they lived like on the other side of the country pretty much, and we would go up there once or twice a year for holidays, and they're very loving, safe people. And I would feel really, really safe there, and it was such a like an exhale to be up there with them. But it wasn't there enough to sort of like get that bond or that feeling of I can tell them and nothing will happen. There was just always this overriding fear of I will die. But I did tell, the first person that I told was one of my dad's girlfriends, and it was when I was around 8 years old. And I actually told her quite innocently, because in my mind I had kind of like gathered that it was a secret between me and him, and that I wasn't allowed to tell anyone outside of the family. But because she was his girlfriend and she was like a part of it, that little, family, it felt like, oh, I could probably tell her because she's like with him now. And so that was just how my brain was at 8. And I told her, and she panicked and got really emotional. We were doing the dishes and she like dropped the dish and she was hysterical. And my father came into the room and was like, what's happening? Like, what did you say? What's going on? And she said what I had said. And then he was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, he's just in my face, pointing, spit flying, like screaming, seeing red, like, you can't fucking say that. It's a really big deal. It's illegal. Like, it's a really serious matter. Like, you need to tell her right now that you're lying. Like, why would you say that? Like, just basically damage control. And he just kept saying to me, you need to tell her the truth. Tell her the truth. Tell her that it's a lie. Tell her that that is not happening, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up saying to her, I'm sorry, I lied. And then he sent me to my room. He sent her home and told her that he needed time with me to figure out what was happening here and why I was lying about this. And then he did it to me again. And I was so confused of like, why is it such a, if you just told me that you could go to jail and that it's illegal and that it's a really bad thing and it's a secret, why are you doing it to me again? And that was kind of like a bit of a pivotal moment, because I was like, oh, this is actually wrong. And yeah, I would have had to, maybe I was a bit older than 8. I might have even been like nearly 10 at that point. I know, like, again, like timelines are really difficult, especially when you're blocked out years. I know which houses I live in, but it's like hard to place your ages. But, and then after that, I didn't tell anyone until I told my best friend when I was around like 13, 14. And I had, as I mentioned, like I was really bullied, had really big issues with friends, being bullied every day at school. And there was this beautiful boy who just became my best friend. And he was so protective and so loving and just the most beautiful, happy, smiley boy. And I formed a really strong bond with him and he became my best friend. And I told him, and he was quite protective and quite upset about it and, you know, wanted something to happen. But a few months later, he was hit by a car and killed. So that nothing ever happened with that. Obviously, never went anywhere. After that, I was tortured by my dad and my grandfather. They got together and decided that they needed to scare me a little bit more so that I didn't speak up. My grandfather told me this is what happens when you speak. And there was a day where they just really sadistically tortured me. They got together and like things that just are incomprehensible to most people. Quite, awful. And so after that, I didn't tell anyone until I was 30, until I'd done a lot of healing work and my grandfather had died. And
it's one of those things that it's just so hard to like wrap your head around, because I guess it's just, what kind of pain must you be living with, or anger must you be living with, to be able to do such a thing to a vulnerable young child and justify those behaviors? And I think like we as a public, as a population, we have a tendency to kind of be really one way or the other way about it. And there's obviously nothing that can justify that behavior. I am curious though, as to what is the background of your dad that allow himself to do the things that he did?
yeah, I think that day where they tortured me was a really pivotal moment in me understanding. There was multiple moments throughout that day where my dad was really terrified for me and was like, no, stop, like you're going to kill her. And I remember he said to me before I had gone into the room, like, I'm really sorry, but I have to do this. And so it gave me this understanding of like, he had obviously been very abused by his father and was still really terrified of his own father, for him to be able to do what he did to his daughter without like not wanting to do that, if that makes sense. But I always describe my father as like half evil, half good, whereas my grandfather is pure evil. And I think that like what I know, I went on down a really deep family history investigation to try and understand like how he became like that, because I was like, I just don't believe that people are born like that. I just do not and cannot believe that human beings are born in that way. And basically what I uncovered was that his father had lost his parents, I believe, in the Holocaust. And so he was quite young. I think he was like 12 or something when, or like even younger when they'd left, but he was like left on his own, raised by some uncles. He became a part of the Hungarian Revolution, and he then fled the country to Holland, and then he fled from Holland to Australia. And it was later found out that he'd fled Holland because as a 20-year-old man, he had raped a child. And when he got to Australia, they found him and he actually went to an Australian prison. My dad went into an orphanage. And then when he came out of the orphanage, he went back into his dad's custody. So I'm thinking, if you're raping a child that early on in life, fleeing the country, you've got these kids. And so from my dad's perspective, he was in and out of foster care. His mum was killed in a car accident. My grandfather was driving the car. Relatives of mine from Holland have said that they don't believe that that was an accident. They believe that she knew some things about him and he deliberately crashed the car. So I went down all these paths and found out from everyone in that family tree that he was quite the evil man, and he was quite evil. He was physically abusive to her from a young age. So my dad was in the car when it crashed. So my dad's 4 years old, lost his mum, gone into full-time care of this evil man who I can only assume raped him as well, because he raped me when I was 7. My dad raped me when I was older. Like, I just know that that's how this works. Went into foster care, came out of foster care, went into foster care again later when my Opa grandfather had a gambling addiction and lost all of his money and couldn't afford to keep his kids. He just popped him back into a foster care. So my dad's like going through abuse. I know that he was made to eat off the floor. He was locked in cupboards. He was hit with the belt. Like, he was really abused. And he left home when he was like 14 or something like that, 14 or 15. And never went back. And so he then had a really toxic, like a really in and out relationship where he would have his dad, my Opa, in his life for a couple of years, and then he would cut him out and wouldn't speak to him for years and have him in and cut him out. So there was definitely, I feel like there was this part of my dad that didn't want to be like him. There was this part of my dad that knew that everything that happened to him was not okay, and he ran away and he left home, but it just caught up with him, and he did become the same, and he ended up doing the same behaviors. Even, things like, he didn't make me eat off the floor, but there was children were treated in a different way. And so my father he went on a holiday, and he would give gifts to my brother and sister and get them to open them in front of me and not have anything for me. And like, as a child, you just like, it's awful. Like, it sounds like a small thing, but it's like, that different treatment just makes you think that there's something wrong with you. And so he was really replaying those behaviors in different ways. And he always said to me, I never wanted to be, I'm such a better dad than my dad, and I want you to have a better childhood than what I had. And like, that is technically true. It was probably like a minor amount better. So in his head, he probably thought that he was doing it better, but all those patterns and all that trauma was actually replaying. And whether he's, I know that he is consciously aware of that because I know, but yeah. So it was like, it gives me this understanding of like how trauma can actually just happen even when you think that it's not happening. Like, you think that you're doing a better job, but it's almost like he didn't know any different.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you sort of grew up and you started speaking to your siblings, did they have absolutely no abuse happen to them?
No. So they were treated differently, but they were still abused. So my sister doesn't have any memories specifically, but she has, when she's been drunk, she's like said things have happened, and then the next day she's kind of, oh no, and kind of tried to damage control and things like that. And she's on a bit of a journey at the moment to try and uncover her memories. The memory with my Opa, my grandfather, where I was raped when I was 7, that actually happened because that afternoon we were having a sleepover there, and that afternoon my sister had said to me, I'm really scared of Opa coming into my room tonight and touching me or like hurting me, or, she'd said something along the lines of like doing something sexual. And because it had been happening to me, and she was only 5. She's 2 years younger than me, and I was 7. So I was like, fuck, she knows what this is. It must be happening to her. I can't let that happen to her, being the oldest sister. And so that night I actually heard him walking into her room. I heard her door handle open, and I heard him go in, and I just went into this like hypnotic state. And I just like, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I just knew I needed to protect her. And I just started screaming, Opa, 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 at like the top of my voice. And he came into my room and he's like, what is it? And then I was just frozen. I didn't know what to say. And then I just remember him saying, he had like an accent, you stupid girl. And then he closed the door, and that was when he raped me. And so I know that he had to have been doing that to my sister for her to be so terrified of him going into her room. And later on, when I started speaking publicly, a cousin of mine that I didn't have a lot of contact with when we were younger, her mum was my dad's sister. So she came forward and told me that my dad actually raped her when she was 9 and that our upa had also been molesting and raping her when she was a child too. So I know that he was doing it to her. He'd obviously done it to my sister. And then when about 6 months after I came forward to my brother and sister and my mum, my brother came forward and said, I have a few memories too, and I didn't really know what they were, and I was having flashbacks, and he's been on medication and had depression since he was a teenager too, and we never, no one ever knew why. And he was like, yeah, it's been happening to me too, and a lot of things that have been happening in my life in all different areas now start to make sense. He's unfortunately had more repressed memories come through as the years go, and he's still navigating that. But it really opened up this can of worms, essentially. Yeah.
I find it really fascinating how you, your siblings, and your cousin had gone through something similar to different degrees and different levels, but with the same perpetrator and the same kind of sexual abuse around the same age and time, and how trauma response or manifests so differently for all of you. I've spoken to some guests in the past who've had it manifest in dreams. I've had some people who've had it manifest in, very physical ways, back aches and certain aches as they've aged. And so it becomes really hard to detect what is the trauma, what is the source of it, what is the cause of it. So can you just walk me through sort of how did it look for all of you and manifest?
Yeah, we all definitely dissociated to different degrees. And yeah, you're so right, the way that it manifests. What's interesting to me is that out of the 4 of us, all 4 of us repressed it. And it took me down this path of really learning about repressed memory and how repressed memory works and what it is scientifically, and getting into Dr. Jennifer Fried's work. And that really sexual trauma is actually especially quite intense, overwhelming. Sexual trauma like child rape is you really do have to dissociate to a very, very intense level to be able to leave your body and to fully leave that behind. For me, it came out in this almost like a split personality, multiple personalities. So it came out as in intense rage, and then and love and light, and then intense rage and love and light, and lots of physical symptoms. Like I said before, I struggled mostly with headaches and migraines and neck pain, but also my sign was that I couldn't stop. I had business after business, and I would have multiple projects going at one time. I was always busy. I couldn't stop. I spoke a million miles an hour. I was just stuck in fight or flight, but I was using it as fuel. Whereas my brother became from a really young age quite quiet and reserved and didn't speak much, and he withdrew, and he spent a lot of time alone in his room. He was clinical depression. He was very, very quiet, very depressed, no anger, no rage, everything internalized. And we all did do the licking and drying of the lips and had the rash, which is interesting. And then my sister was middle child. My sister, I don't even know how it manifested with her. She was quite quiet too, quite easygoing, didn't really say much. And then my cousin actually is really interesting because she as well was the eldest, and it came up with a lot of anger and rage for her. But she also developed this condition where she had paralysis. So she would go I think it was weeks, maybe even months without being able to walk. She would lose the ability to use her legs, and they couldn't figure out why. And she'd be in hospital having all of these tests. And it wasn't until she uncovered the memory of being raped by my father when she was 9 that she was able to start healing it, because her body would just give up. And so she, again, was always struggling with these intense chronic health conditions. So it's really interesting because we're both the eldest as well. And then the younger ones, it sort of moved more towards they haven't really had any health issues at all, and it didn't really manifest as much physically in their body, but they just withdrew and became more quiet or depressed. And I sometimes think that that's got a lot to do with just your personality, or not personality as in who you're programmed to be, but who you are meant to be, your soul maybe. But also where you sit in that family tree, because I think being the eldest, like I do have very protective side, very protective instincts.
Yeah. When you sort of hit your 20s is when things started kind of flooding back to you in bits and pieces. Can you walk me through what were those things that led you to sort of come to understand? Like, and I know you mentioned that you were really into trauma and you wanted to study and learn all about trauma, and that knack for you being drawn to it kind of maybe opened those windows a little bit. But can you just talk to me a little bit more about how did you start connecting this interest to like your own personal life?
Yeah, I think I'd studied lots of different modalities. So I started with like some spiritual trainings and was trying to like understand spirituality on like a scientific, logical level, because I was always like, I knew that it worked because I'd had healings and was like, this has shifted something, but how? Like, how did that work? So I started studying like spiritual, and then I moved more into like subconscious hypnotherapy, NLP, and then I moved into like emotions and somatics and breath work and how to tap into our body and move our body to heal trauma. And I just kind of went through, and then I started learning like memory processing, like how to actually process traumatic memories and what that looks like and what you need to actually kind of move a memory from something that's open to something that's closed and filed away. And actually what's super interesting is that I always say to people, I had flashbacks all the time. Like throughout my whole life, I had flashbacks. In my 20s, I would be looking after my kids and I'd have these memories like pop into my mind. But I had become so used to it that I had a really, really special way of dealing with it, where I would see this memory and I would know that it was a memory, but I wouldn't be able to like consciously attach a logic to why that's happening or like make meaning of it. It would just be like, oh, don't think about that memory. That's gross. And I would blink my eyes really hard and I would be like, you're disgusting for thinking about that. So I would have these flashbacks of my dad doing these disgusting things to me or making me do things to him. And I would just blink my eyes and say, you're disgusting for thinking about that. And I knew there were memories, but I never like, and this sounds so wild, but I never was like pairing the fact that my dad was doing that and that it was wrong and that he is a certain person with who my dad was in the present moment. So I was able to keep maintaining a relationship with him where I pretended that everything was fine and that I didn't remember anything, because I didn't necessarily remember it. I saw it and I knew it was there, but I didn't remember it in context for what it actually was, which is so hard to wrap your head around. It was hard for me to wrap my head around.
So do you mean like you kind of, when you were shutting it down, it was kind of like a part of you saying, no, this is bad. This is naughty. I shouldn't be having these kind of thoughts of my dad. I shouldn't be sexualizing my dad. Like that's not normal. But not understanding that those were not, it was not actually you romanticizing your dad, but it was actually you uncovering memories.
Remembering.
Right.
Yes. And the way that I coped with that was that I would say that I'm disgusting because I would make it about me and not him. And it allowed me to like, to the point where if someone had have said to me, your dad sexually abused you, I'd be like, what? Like, I love my dad. What are you talking about? I'd feel it in my body. I'd probably have a panic attack internally, but my brain logically would be like, I don't know what they're talking about. That's just like I had a friend who told me that she was sexually abused by her dad, and I became obsessed with it for her and was thinking about her and like just wasn't really, couldn't like comprehend that that was my life and that that had happened to me. And so I'd done a lot of healing work. Like I'd worked on the bullying and I'd worked on like the molar pregnancy and the Lyme disease and past relationships and, work with my mom and some things with my stepdad. And I'd done a lot of other trauma healing. And after I had healed from Lyme disease, I did this meditation one day. And at this point, I was already practicing healing. I was already, I had started to incorporate everything that I'd learned. And I started creating my own way of healing where I would process the memories using somatics, subconscious, and energy work, and was kind of like blending all of those things together. And it was really powerful. It started off as like literally like I'm taking a break from work and it's $50 a session for a little bit of spending money, to like seeing 400 people in the first like year or two. Like it just exploded because it was so rapid and so powerful. And it was just like healing people within 1 to 2 sessions. Like it was just insane. And so that kind of just like took off on its own without me having to do anything. But in the process of that, I I was trying to like increase my healing abilities. So I went down this little path of like, I'm going to become like the most powerful healer possible. And I was doing these intuition meditations, and I was listening to this meditation, and it was like how to increase your intuition. And it was like she was guiding you along this path, and you go through these 3 doors and you know exactly which door to go through. And then on the path, there's a guide, and the guide is going to bring you to a message. And I was like, okay. And I look up, and the guide is my dad. And I'm like, that's shit. I don't want my dad to be my guide. I want like Tony Robbins or Buddha or something. Like, I was like, really knew who I wanted my guide to be. Yeah. But I was like, okay, the whole point of this is to trust your intuition and to trust yourself. So I'm seeing my dad. Let's follow dad. And as I start to follow him, the forest that's supposed to be a beautiful forest starts to go really dark. And like all the trees started dying, and it like goes really pitch black. And I was like, oh, and I felt this feeling that I'd felt a million times of like, oh, this feels wrong. This feels scary. I don't want to look at this. And I went to pull my earphones out, and this like voice, my intuition, myself, higher self, whatever you want to call it, was like, just keep going. That's the point. Just keep going. Just listen. And so I put my earphones back in, and I was like, and I followed him to this building. And again, this building started to turn into like this dilapidated, creepy factory. And we went in, and there was 3 boxes. And it was like your guide's showing you which box you need to open, because there's a message inside one of these boxes. And the box opened up, and these flashbacks came out, these memories. And it was like this moment of, oh, why are these memories in the box? Because it was like, I've seen these memories thousands of times. Like, me in the shower with my dad, me in the bed. And there was like these memories floating, and it was like, why are those memories in the box? That's weird. And it was the first time in my life that I was like, oh, hold on a second. Why is my dad doing that to me? That's not right. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Why do I have these memories? I know that they're memories. They're not dreams. They're real memories. I've thought about them thousands of times. Why are they happening? And I pulled my earphones out and just literally was like, what did I just like? It just cracked everything open. I called my mum and was like, I think dad sexually abused me. I have these memories, and I've had them forever, but I didn't like look at them in the right way or something. I was so confused. I was like, is this real? Can this happen? What is this? Like, surely your brain can't do that. Surely this isn't right. Surely I'm wrong. I love my dad. My dad's great. He's a great dad. And then I went down this path, and I started to realize, oh, actually, I only have 4 really good memories with my dad, and I play them on repeat in my brain, like this little happy movie. But I actually don't have any more than that. None. And so I just started to question everything, and it was the fucking worst time of my life because it was like I had to like break this intense trauma bond. I had to grieve him. I had to cut him out of my life. I had to speak up and tell everybody what had happened, even though I thought that I was going to die, because I was so conditioned to believing I was going to die. It was just like grief and pain. And at the time I was married to my now ex-husband, who gave me 0 support. He actually told me not to speak about it because it was he didn't want it to affect him. And so I just was like in it alone, raising 2 small kids. My boys were like 3 and 5 maybe at the time, or like 2 and 4 maybe. And I just had to navigate this, like, do I tell my family, and then telling them, and then cutting my dad out. And I ended up having a complete nervous breakdown to the point where I thought I was schizophrenic, because I started hearing his voice and having hallucinations because I was so convinced that he was going to come and kill me. I was like, what have I done? And yeah, I just reached this lowest of low, like fearing him, grieving him, fearing him, grieving him, missing him, wanting to run to him, being terrified of him, and just so confused, and really brought out these like DID and these personalities and this split that I had, and brought up all of these layers. But luckily for me, I had already learned everything that I needed to know about healing, and I knew exactly what to do with it. And it took me quite a few months to actually kick into action to start doing all of those things, because I was just paralyzed. But I did know what to do, and I did know how to heal it, and I did know that it was possible because I'd done it with other memories and I'd done it with other aspects of healing. So I was like, same thing, let's apply it. Let's go.
That's awesome that you kind of had those little tools in your basket to be able to sort of pull out in the very moment that something comes up. You are having a major panic attack in that very moment. You know what you need to do in that very moment to just help you to rebalance and recalibrate. Can you walk me through that process that you went through and that healing for yourself?
Yeah, it was a couple of years of just honestly, once I uncovered like the bulk of memories that were kind of the same, I knew how to process them. So some of them I processed myself, some of them I would process with somebody else if I felt like I didn't quite know how to navigate it. But I spent like a lot of time just as new flashbacks would come up, processing literally each memory as it came up, but also looking at what I maybe learned about myself in each memory. What did I like take, as to be true from whatever was happening? So whether it was that I was weak or pathetic or helpless or disgusting or wrong, I would look at what I was thinking about myself and feeling internally in those memories, and I would also shift those subconsciously. So as I was going through and processing each of these memories as they came up, I was also like literally reprogramming my identity and who I believed that I was as a result of what happened. And so I went from like the lowest of low self-worth, like compared myself to every single woman that I came across, felt like I was less than everybody around me, just had no confidence, couldn't speak publicly, absolutely not, couldn't even video myself to put it on Instagram because I would be like, I'm so ugly, I'm disgusting, and I'd pick all these flaws, and just went from not being able to speak up, stand up for myself. Like as I started to process the memories and shift the subconscious beliefs, my personality started to change, and I started to like create who I wanted to be, and would like sort of bring in the opposite of what I believed about myself in those memories. And I started to build this like power. And it was when I'd gone through a number of those traumas and those memories that I would be hit with something bigger. And I would remember something that I, again, had already remembered, but had more context to it, or I would have the full picture. And so I'd gone through all of those like molesting memories. And then I was hit with the memory of my dad raping me when I was 20, which was another level of kind of like pain and complication and confusion and terror, and just so many more layers to it because I was older and I knew what was happening, and I felt like it was my fault and I shouldn't have been there. And then I would heal that, and I would find new things that I'd believed about myself because of that, and I would process them, and then something else would come. And I got to the point where I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like sometimes now when I have the feeling, because there's a really specific feeling now that I know when a memory is coming, if I have that feeling, I'm like, no, no, I'm done. This is enough. Like I was getting to the point where I get a memory and I'd just be like, when will this stop? And I got angry at my brain. I was like, brain, why are you doing this? Like, just give me all the memories at once.
Yeah, exactly. So I could just do the work that I need to do once and for all, and get it over with.
But then when I looked back, I was like, you know what? If I had have been given all of those memories in that first meditation at once, I 100% would have killed myself. There is no way that I would have survived that, because some of those later memories, I definitely needed a certain level of strength to be able to deal with that. And that is why our brain is so smart. It's not doing this to piss me off. It's doing this to actually protect me, because it knows when I can handle it and when I couldn't. And so it's actually just one of those really smart protective things that your brain does. And so now I just thank my brain instead of being angry at it. But I literally just did it that way. And this is the thing that I guess sets me apart from a lot of people with similar trauma, is that when they get a new memory, they go into like, it's never going to end. This is fucked. It's never going to end. I'm never going to get better. The memories are getting worse. What's the point? I feel worse than ever. But the truth is, all the work that you've actually done has set you up to get you to the point where you can handle this memory. And once you heal it and you get past it, the next level version of yourself that you become is even better than what you've just experienced. So you're not actually going backwards, you're still going forwards, but it just feels so much more intense when those bigger memories come through. And granted, sometimes like I spent, it was like 4 months from remembering my dad raping me to actually processing it. And I knew what to do, but I avoided it because I just didn't want to do it. And so I actually have a really good partner now, or my fiance actually. But he now but he actually, like, the last memory that I had and the one before that, he straight away within a couple of days was like, I know that you have this pattern of, like, with the big ones kind of avoiding them, but you actually know what to do. And last time you did it, you felt better within 2 days. So, like, go lay down, do what you need to do now. And so he would like encourage me to do that. And it is always the same. Within like 2 to 3 days, it's gone.
And when you say gone, like once you've processed it, like is it that that memory just never comes back again? Or is it that when it does come back, but you just look at it differently?
Yeah, sometimes, like, I rarely will remember it. But if I do, like, as if someone talks about it or I go to like a place where something happened, it'll come into my mind, but it'll be like, oh, interesting. Like, I remember like that memory is there, but it doesn't affect me now. And I feel it with no emotions, no panic, no feelings, no like narrative around it, around like how bad it is or what it means or that was awful or like anything like that. It's just like, oh yeah, that thing happened in the past. And then I just move on it within minutes. It's not there anymore. And I speak about it and I leave this computer and I go and make some lunch and I don't think about it again.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it feels like sometimes it didn't even happen in a way. Like, I remember it, but it's like, that's weird. It's like, it's not me, but it is me.
Yeah. Would you then say that trauma is a process that can be complete at some point? Or do you think it's like an ongoing thing that you'd forever kind of be integrating and working through?
It's a process that can be complete. Absolutely. I think like there are like tentacles. I think like there's tentacles of it. And sometimes I'll find myself like saying or doing something and I'm like, oh, that's a little bit toxic, whatever. And it's like, where does that come from? And it's like some small little derivative, but it gets to the point where it's just like, oh, that's just like, that's because of this, but we can fix that. That's just a little minor fix. But yeah, I think like it takes work, especially if you've had volumes of trauma, because like my entire identity was like stacked up around trauma. Like there was no part of me that was untouched by it. So I literally had to create an entirely new version of myself based off processing all of those memories. And in all of those memories, making myself feel like powerful and strong and loved and, and bringing in those feelings that I wanted. So it does take time, but if you commit to it and you go into each trauma and each memory or each trigger or each negative thought that you have and you actually do find the source and heal it correctly, which is the bit that people often don't get right, which is, they're doing it on one element. Maybe they're just working on it at a subconscious level, but they're not actually shifting any energy or emotion or actually processing a memory, or they're just going to EMDR and processing their memories, but they still have this whole entire identity that's built around the trauma and a nervous system that can't cope with anything. And so there's like, you have to do it from all of those 4 pillars. And that's why I created a RUCA, because in one session, you process the memory, you shift the energy, you remove the subconscious beliefs, and like you somatically experience and move the emotions, it completes it. And that's why like people like one session, like one you only have to work on a memory once. And I'm like, yes. Yeah. And they don't believe you. And I have like a really beautiful client she came to me and she had been in psychology for like 10, 15 years from this gang rape. She had been gang raped and she'd been tricked into it when she was 15. And she just couldn't let it go. It was affecting every area of her life. And we did one healing session on it and she didn't believe me. She left thinking, she was like, okay, like she just kept saying, we'll just see what happens. We'll just see what happens. And then like 3 days later, she messaged me and she was like, what the fuck did you do? And she has been like my number one person now. She's like, she sends so many people with trauma to me. And she's like, it's just one session, just go. And I mean, one session for that one trauma. If you're somebody who has been molested and raped and abused like all throughout childhood, you've got a lot of memories. So there is a volume that you need to process and work through. And that's where it's kind of like people say, how long is it going to take? And it's like, well, how much trauma do you have?
Yeah, I love that. I was reading a little bit about Ruka as well earlier, and like the sort of like four different like layers that it kind of like taps into that healing process. So it really goes from that very kind of memory level all the way down to that somatic level. I'm your client and I walk into your room. What am I going to expect? What is that going to sort of look like?
Yeah. So you either come to me with what you already know that you're struggling with and you want to work on, or if you don't, I just normally say, like, what's the thing at the moment, like in life right now, that you're struggling with the most? And we just start there. But what it looks like is me kind of getting an idea of, like, if I could wave a magic wand, I often say this, how would you, what would change for you, like within the next 2 days? If I could wave a magic wand today and you would have something shifted or something different, what would it be? And sometimes people will say, well, this trauma, I have flashbacks all the time, or I'm always anxious. And so I would ask them a series of questions to uncover what the trauma is, what the limiting beliefs are. We spend about 10 minutes chatting and me just getting a bit of an idea. I'm like crazily writing notes, listening to every word that you say, kind of mapping it all out. And then I would get my client to lay down and I would put them into a theta brainwave, so into like a hypnotic state, to access their subconscious. And they spend the rest of the session laying down with their eyes closed. And so a lot of what we would do would be going back and processing memories. So going back into the memories, which is the bit where people are always like, oh, don't really want to do that, don't want to go back there. And so what I do often say to people at the start of a session is, if you've been to psychologists before, you're probably thinking that this first session is going to be like a bit of a meet and greet, get to know each other. We're just going straight in. Are you happy with that? And they're like, oh. And if they're not, I'm like, we can like waste a session, or I can show you how it works today. And everybody is like, okay, show me how it works. So we dive straight in, and that's the way that I actually don't really see clients one-on-one anymore. There's just like a few that I see each week, but I've funneled all of my clients, because there was thousands of them, into the 6 therapists that I've got in my online clinic. So I have a clinic where I've trained these women, they go to them, and they all work in the same way. I've trained them to like go get straight in there. Yeah. And then the rest of the session is spent laying down. So we go through, we process memories. We might do some forgiveness, some self-forgiveness. So we've got different techniques there to like cut energetic cords with people. To, if there's abusive people, we sometimes like shrink them down. Then we have these conversations with them. We go back into a number of different memories. And whilst the person is in the memory and they're having this conversation, or they're doing what I'm guiding them sort of to do in that memory, like I'm quite tapped in intuitively to know where to take it. But also, whilst they're having those conversations, I'm also writing down anything that they're saying, because they might be saying, you made me feel like a piece of shit. You made me feel completely worthless. You made me feel whatever it is, because everything is done out loud, because sematics, words are very important that we say them out loud, not just think them. And so I'm writing them down, and they're their subconscious beliefs that I'm going to be shifting as well, because that's what they decided in that moment. That's why they're saying it. So then I'm going to go back at the end of the session, and I'm going to shift those subconscious beliefs, and I'm going to replace them with some more powerful, uplifting, whatever the opposite is of those beliefs. Again, we're doing that at the end of the session. We're bringing in all the positives, and we're doing some like visualization, some different things there for them to like really feel like that new version of themselves. As well, throughout the memories, we're also regulating. So there's different things that I will get my clients to do, like in the middle of a memory or at the end of a memory, for them to be able to regulate and bring their nervous system back down, and for the body to know that that has shifted, for the body to know that the memory is complete, because we have to bring them in together. So there's certain steps that I would get them to take throughout that memory processing for the body to know. And then we're finishing really uplifting with like repeating out some of those like subconscious beliefs. Everyone opens their eyes and feels a combination of tired and lighter.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And then we give it a few days for the brain to like catch up with what we've just done, because it's quite instant and rapid. And, you know, we give the brain time to kind of recalibrate. And within that first like 2 days to 2 weeks, people say, I think different, I speak different, I even look different. Some people have said, like, I've gone out with some friends and everyone tells me that I look different, and we start to shift like from there. So it sounds intense and scary for some people, but it's like one of those things that the hour and a half does go quite fast because most of it you are laying down with your eyes closed. And it's one of those things that it's like scary to go into it, but you always, and I do this too, afterwards, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I did that.
Right. It's almost like a form of self-care in a sense, right? Like I feel
Absolutely.
that way when I do a workout. I come back and I'm like, oh, I feel so good about that, even though like I was dreading it beforehand. So,
Yes,
I love it.
exactly the same. And once you're in it, you're not kind of like, oh, I want to go home. I don't want to do this. Once you're in it, you're in it. Like you're deep in it. And when you're in your subconscious and you're in that theta brainwave, you're just kind of like, time doesn't really, you don't really notice time. Some people open their eyes and like, was that already time? Like that went fast.
Yeah.
But because it's just you're doing the work,
Right.
same as the workout.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about an instance or, a specific moment when you were kind of doing this healing on someone where you kind of witnessed transformation or you witnessed this kind of person sort of letting it go? Or if not during the session, afterwards have come back to you with like, some shifts and changes that they've told you about?
I have hundreds. I think I have 2 full highlight reels on Instagram of screenshots from people, like hundreds of people that are like, my partner can't believe how different I am, like that I'm communicating differently, relationships completely turned around, like people owning their triggers and working on their triggers, their relationships just blossom. I've had people who physically look different, people who have like had a session and made a complete career change and moved into a career that they've always thought about but never like had the guts to kind of pursue. They message and they're like, guess what I just did? People that are like that physically like look like I've had people come in and look quite like black under the eyes and tired and just just like not lifeless but like not well. And then they sit up and they speak to me at the end and I'm like, you look different, you physically look different. And they go and look in the mirror and they're like, whoa, like it just that one I just can't explain how rapid that is, but the messages are always just, I'm not thinking those thoughts anymore. Oh, I haven't had a single flashback. I can't believe it. And I remember one of my favorite ones was, she was like, I used to always read your testimonials and they would be like, oh, this is life-changing. It's life-changing. And I'd be like, oh, how cliche, like life-changing. And she's like, it literally changed my life. I get it now. And I think for me as well, like it's, I know that I've gone from walking into a room and feeling like the smallest person to feeling like an equal. And I've, gone from being in a relationship feeling like I'm so lucky that they chose me and that, I don't deserve them, to, again, feeling like an equal, but also having someone that loves me and builds me up and supports me and, wants the best for me. And I couldn't have imagined that in a relationship. I couldn't even visualize that until I'd done a certain level of healing work to be able to desire it, then accept it and find it. And I think like the way that I view myself when I look in the mirror is completely different. I don't wake up and go straight to the scales or look in the mirror and start looking at flaws. I don't even look in the mirror half the time. I'm just kind of like, like what you do, your daily habits, like people doing this like, mindset coaching and they're doing like these programs and they're trying to like shift these patterns. They're like, oh, I've got this pattern of like, I'm like binge eating, or I'm got this pattern of like self-sabotage, or I can't follow through with things. And they're trying to like use sheer force to change these negative thought patterns or low self-confidence, whatever it is. And if you find the root and you heal it, the pattern just disappears naturally. You don't have to do it with force. You find where it comes from and it disappears. So I think that's one of the most powerful things, is that like everything that you program into your mind starts to become your reality.
I love that. I love that. This is really reminding me of some of the episodes that I've done. It really does sound like a combination of all these different kinds of modalities, because there is a little bit of NLP here, like there's a little bit of that rewiring of your physical brain. And then there's the other part, which is that spiritual and energetic part, which is equally as vital. I'm reading this book, The Body That Keeps the Score. And he even talks about in that book that, that he'd reached a certain breakthrough with his clients where he would talk about it, he would unravel the trauma of these like war veterans. And once they'd start going and they'd start talking, he'd basically open that can of worms. But then the healing was not happening. There was no shift happening because they didn't know how to sort of let it go. It doesn't just stop at one modality.
Yeah, and The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk, I actually have done training with him. And I've read that book 3 times because he references father-daughter sexual abuse specifically a lot in that book. So I went and did training with him, and I learned a lot about the brain and about the links between the brain and the body and things. And yeah, it's such a fascinating book.
Jessica, how can our listeners find you? How can they, access your healing and your work?
Yeah, the best way is always probably social media. I am Jessica Ella. But as well, website jessicaella.com.au. That's where you can find like information about the certification. There's the one-on-one therapy in there to find like a trauma therapist to work with. I'm always happy with people as well if they come to me with like what their trauma is, so I can direct them to which of those 6 therapists is the best. I'm always happy to like kind of guide people. I do open up spots very, very rarely to my email list. So anyone who's on the email list can snatch up a spot, but it's probably like once every couple of months. And then, yeah, like everything else is on there. Triggered to Thriving is the program that I've created, which is kind of literally what it sounds like, Triggered to Thriving. It's all the stages that I went through, like all of the different, moving from traumatized to like getting a bit more power to then like being afraid to be seen and going through all of those different layers of self. So everything is on there across those 2 platforms.
I love that. Thanks so much, Jessica, for sharing your story and all of the healing that you've done. And I feel like there's so much our listeners are going to be able to take away from this. So I really, really appreciate you doing this with me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was a great chat.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Lucas, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.